Welcome to Season 7 of Wellness as a Way of Life for Women Building the Future. I'm Megan Swan, wellness coach, consultant, and strategist, here to champion visionary women who are shaping tomorrow. This season, we dive into holistic wellness practices, mindset shifts, and real life stories from women who are leading change in tech, entrepreneurship, and beyond. My mission is to help you integrate wellness into every facet of your journey, so much so that it feels like a way of life. So you can show up as your most vibrant and impactful self. You can be a part of the movement by subscribing to my Substack for exclusive wellness tools, inspiring interviews, and a thriving community of future builders. There is a free and soon-to-be paid option launching this fall. And if you enjoy this episode, share it with a friend who's building the future too. Welcome to Wellness as a Way of Life for Women Building the Future, where we spotlight visionary female founders who are reshaping entire industries. Today, we're diving deep into the future of women's health with someone who doesn't just predict what's coming, she's actively shaping it. Anna Butterworth is the founder of UltraViolet Agency, the world's first trend forecasting agency dedicated exclusively to women's health and Femtech. Anna's journey is remarkable. She started at LV's inaugural communications hire, helping build one of Femtech's most iconic brands from the ground up. But Anna saw something bigger on the horizon. She recognized that while billion-dollar corporations and innovative startups were all racing to capture the women's health market, no one was providing the strategic foresight they desperately needed. So she created it. UltraViolet Agency is now the only company in the world writing comprehensive trend forecasts, specifically in the Femtech industry. Anna's work spans from developing long-term foresight strategies for global organizations to advising Femtech startups worldwide. Her influence extends far beyond just identifying trends. Her initiatives are designed to align with evolving needs of tomorrow's consumers, and her impact stems from a rare combination of deep market insight, an expansive global network, and an unwavering commitment to enhance women's health through technology. From breakthrough technologies hitting the market in the next 18 months to the seismic shifts happening in how we approach reproductive health, fertility, and beyond, Anna's got her finger on the pulse of it all. So whether you're a founder looking to break into Femtech, an investor trying to spot the next big opportunity, or simply someone fascinated by the future of women's health, this conversation is going to open your eyes to possibilities you probably haven't even imagined. Anna Butterworth, welcome to the show.
Wow, can you just follow me around and introduce me all the time to people? That was
well, I was rereading the forecast for 2035, which we will link in the show notes, because I mean I think I've read it 5 or 6 times now, and there's always something that stands out. And I'd love to know, like, let's go back to when you're deciding to start UltraViolet. Like, what was it one moment? Was it a series of moments? Is it led by what you felt you personally needed to do as a mission, or really just passionate about what was lacking?
it's evolved over time as well. So when, pre-LV, I had the whole extra bit of my career, and 10 years or so, where I was working in marketing communications, just wasn't in women's health, right? I went to LV, and that's really where I became I say I became radicalized into the mission of closing the gender health and data gap. I was in my late 20s at the time, and I didn't even understand that my menstrual cycle had 4 phases. I thought I had a period for a week and then just 3 weeks of nothing, right? I was in my late 20s. I was educated, I was pretty enlightened, and I was just shocked that there were these really, really basic tenets of my life that I just didn't understand. And I just thought this was shocking. And then being at LV, I mean, I learned a lot, not just about women's health, but about women's health marketing and women's health growth potential. And I became really frustrated that there were all of these brands that were really, really struggling. Women's health brands have got a very different route to market than other brands. And when I went to LV, I was like, I've done this loads of times. I think I can tick these boxes and press these buttons, and there's a marketing campaign. And it's not the same with women's health. We need a much, much longer lead time. We need to do much more education, particularly back in 2015 when I first joined LV. But even now, I mean, there is so much we still don't really understand. We have to do much, much more education to the consumer than we do about, I don't know, a shaving cream or a cream of some sort or hair stuff. So you need to be able to give the consumer a bit more time, and you need to be able to give brands more time, more lead time, right? So when you think about fundraising, when you think about investment, these brands need more capital because we have a longer lead time to reaching that consumer. So I really understood that at LV, and then UltraViolet initially launched as a marketing communications agency dedicated to this industry, because I had learned all of these tricks and trips about how to market to that female consumer. And how to specifically market women's health brands and taboo women's health brands. It was a pelvic floor trainer then. So we were talking about vaginas, we were talking about prolapse, we were talking about incontinence, all of these really unsexy things. And we had to make it sexy and interesting and cool. So, and some women's health stuff is a little bit unsexy, but you have to make it accessible, and you have to make it something that people actually want to engage with, right? So UltraViolet initially launched as a women's health and femtech focused marketing and communications agency. But as I grew, my reputation in the field, and I started to see, upwards of hundreds and hundreds of femtech brands each year. Speaking with investors, I was mentoring across a number of accelerators, and it just really became clear to me that we were still so focused on trying to solve these very, very specific challenges. Women's health and femtech is an industry that is filled with very, very frustrated women who have had an awful experience in something and are trying to fix it. But it means we end up with a lot of point solutions, and sometimes very, very similar sorts of solutions are coming to the market. All of these solutions are fighting for the right talent, for these very small pots of money that we've been given by investors or by grants. And we end up with this really, really fragmented industry. And it didn't feel like there was anyone who was thinking about what are the really big core challenges in women's health that we need to solve in order to kind of blanket improve everyone's experience and make sure that the way that we move forward in women's health is in a really strategic and meaningful way. And that was really the catalyst for the future side of the agency. So it was really about making sure that we had somebody, me now, thinking about how are all of these different things really going to impact, and how can we meet that future female consumer need? Because if we really understand who she is and her needs and all the technologies and the culture that she's going to be living in and what she'll have access to and what she'll understand, if we really understand her, then we can build more effectively today. So that was really the catalyst for the future side. And honestly, it's been phenomenal. I mean, the response has been fantastic. The reports are always really well received, and I hear brilliant responses from people like you telling me that they read them all the time and they're really enjoying them. So it means a lot that people are now starting to take this really seriously. And we're working with really huge global organizations that are thinking very seriously about how they either begin implementing new women's health strategies, how they begin building out femtech departments. So they're focusing much more on tech if they had been a traditional kind of legacy or pharma business before. We're really seeing people thinking about innovation and thinking about that future piece, which is really, really exciting to see.
And so this last one that has the 10-year vision, is that always how you set it up with tenure, or do you have ones that were like year by year?
Yeah, so initially we were doing sort of a year ahead. So we would release them sort of early 2021, and it would be a 2022 report. Last year was the first time we did a 10-year report, and actually now we have a series of reports coming out with that time frame. So this year we're releasing the future of women's sports and fitness, the future of menopause, and the future of maternal care, and they will all have a 2035 vision.
I think that's what it makes it so, I don't know, like it was just like full of terms that I had to Google, which to me is so exciting. And like new words, and yeah, like I really feel like it's a few things that I've read recently that feel visionary. So how do you put it together, and like what's the timeline, and are you how are you proof testing it, or if you will?
Yeah. We have a pretty robust methodology now. So initially I have a researcher that does a really big landscape piece of research. Me and her pulled together pretty much everything we can find on that particular topic. So, you know, the future of menopause, for example, we do a really, really big deep dive. We have a global vision, but really the reports are kind of US, UK, EU focused. We'll sprinkle in a little bit of global insights, but we're focusing on giving each region a region-specific report. So you'll start to see region-specific reports coming out from 2026, which is really exciting. So we do this really big landscape piece of research, and then I work with trend experts to start synthesizing this research and start to analyze what are these early signals that we're seeing? What are the really key drivers that are changing the way that culture, social society, politics, how are all of these things shifting? How is technology shifting? And how is that going to change over the next 10 years? And you have to look at how things have changed over the last 10 years, 5 years, and think about how these trajectories might develop over the next 10 years. You can never really, really know, but you can start thinking about how might these develop over the next 10 years. Once we've synthesized a couple of these trends, I then speak with a range of experts, and it could be, you know, upwards of 20, 30 experts across social, political, technological, environmental, medical industries and commercial industries and consumer industries to start validating some of those. And that's really the validation piece, right? We're saying we're seeing these trends, we're seeing these innovations, we think these developments will happen over the next 10 years. What's your view? What are you seeing? Does this seem does this seem like it's effective? Is this the way this is going to go? Do you think there's something else? Is there something that we're missing? And this is how we build out our real validation piece, because we like to speak with a lot of experts from across a number of different industries to really make sure that we're seeing everything and we're not missing anything, but also that we've got an accurate understanding of how these things could develop, particularly when it comes to technology or social cultural shifts, right? How might these things change? And when it comes to women's health, it's a very fraught time. You know, there is so much happening in the progressive and the regressive space, right? So we have these big tensions, these huge global tensions that are happening. You know, we're seeing it in the US, but we're seeing it everywhere, right? This pullback as well as this push forward. So what are these tensions? How are they interacting? How are they going to change? And what's really going to be that impact over the next 10 years? And it can be really tough, right? And so you never say this will happen. You say these things could happen. We call it the cone of futures, the possible, the probable, the preferable. And to really understand what the options are. And in our reports, we like to demonstrate not only what could happen, but what should happen. What should the future look like for women's health? Here are some of the potential positive outcomes of this technology or of this innovation or of this development. Here are some of the potential risks, and what can we do to mitigate those risks? And I think those bits are really important because you don't see those in other futures reports. But I think it's really important that we understand what the risks are when it comes to women's health so that we can safeguard them today.
Yeah, I love in the introduction that you essentially kind of paint the picture of how this is like a pivotal moment, and that if we don't have some sort of intentional, you know, guardrails or assurance that, you know, women are at the forefront in designing these things, it could go the opposite way. But I think in general, correct me if I'm wrong, like you try and take an optimistic viewpoint when you're with the trends, right?
Yeah, I am a serial optimist, and because it can get quite challenging when you're deep in thinking about
Dystopian
the
is the
future
word
and you're
you
looking
used,
at
and
things.
I think it's like,
Yeah,
oh, yeah. I mean, I was just I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but what did you call it? It's like the end of patriarchal WASP culture. I'm like, yeah, it's like I feel like they're fighting for the end. They're fighting their last battles. Let's hope. But yeah,
we'll
so
see.
the hyperhuman health, the social hacktivism, I don't even know how I pronounce this. It's like AI in the middle of ethical, which brilliant, like
Ethical, yeah.
ethical, and techno naturalism. Just like what's your favorite? What are you personally buzzing most about? I know it's hard to pick from shit.
It is. I mean, you know, I'm liberal. I'm a champagne socialist, right? So the social hacktivism stuff really does excite me. I think it's really exciting that we're seeing this push back against big tech, big pharma, big innovation, big government. We're trying to figure out a way to create a bit more ownership over our lives, and we're over surveilled, and it's very, very difficult to disengage from a lot of these systems. And I think particularly with the rise of blockchain, with the rise of DAOs, we're going to start seeing people be able to kind of ring fence their digital and offline experiences in a way that's quite meaningful. So that one does get me excited. The techno-naturalism piece as well, because it's very challenging, I think, to work in an industry where you're trying to push innovation, you're trying to push technology, but right now technology is kind of the antithesis of environmentalism. It's particularly looking at AI, the way that we create technology, any technological product that you use is so damaging to the environment in every single way, in the way that it's developed, in the way that it's produced, in the way that it's shipped, in the way that it decomposes or not, right? There is literally nothing in it that is
Well, the amount
good
of
for
the
the
amount of
environment.
energy and now with AI water that it requires, yeah, it's like
Yeah.
it's
And charging all your tools and your thing, like all of it is just terrible for the environment. So thinking about ways that we can use technology in a symbiotic way with nature and make them actually support each other is really exciting.
yeah. I actually just recently participated. I'm in this women's group called Toast, and they generally every once in a while they do hackathons. And this last one was we had to create a software, some new technology to help uh, build awareness and actual change around sustainability. And I think there is more and more conversation about, okay, how can tech actually solve these problems? And how can we look at that differently? And for me, in my personal viewpoint, I think we're going to come back to the reality that, our bodies are technology. Like we have our own algorithms. We are something that, consciousness is still not solved by science. And so like more intertwined understanding of what, not tech doesn't have to be some wire or plastic or, thinking of the word technology differently, I think
Mhm.
is part of it.
And there are a few things as well. Sometimes some of the most interesting things can't really make it into the report because you have to create a kind of cohesive story and something that is easy and synthesized and is understandable. So there's lots of really exciting things that don't make it into the report. For example, innovations in technology that are allowing things like a forest to feed back information to humans, right? To tell us what they need so we can better understand how to take care of them. And so using technology in those ways as well is I mean, for one, it's not only possible, but people are doing it at the moment. I mean, in a fairly basic way, but we'll have more and more understanding of how nature is responding to the way that we are behaving, which I think is going to be really interesting. You might even start to see, and this again is my um, the optimist in me coming out, but you might start to see, you know, the Amazon rainforest having a seat on the UN Council, for example, right? Able to respond to change, able to respond to our impacts. And that would be something that's really powerful and really interesting. And that would be using technology. We can't do that without technology, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, similarly, I was researching the other day, there's really incredible indigenous owned and led technology solving for the wildfires here in Canada. It's, only going to be an increasing problem. But things like, tuning into the intuition or like what a given herd or animal is doing because they have a better sense of things that are coming than, necessarily some sort of drone, let's say. So I think there's so much happening. I'd love if you could wax and wane a little bit about it mentions in the report the difference in spirituality that you're seeing and like the AI worship, but then also, I think tuning into the indigenous wisdom and, again, like we don't talk about it as technology, but this deeper understanding of nature that indigenous cultures already have.
Yeah. That's also, I think, really exciting. And we're seeing this pivot already, right? But again, I think there is still this tension between the two really big forces. So we're seeing a really big move away from traditional forms. Let's not say traditional. Some of the more dominant forms of spirituality, which are more subscribed to big religion, right? They've had a really big moment with people. We're seeing people move away from them, but they're still searching for some kind of answer and some kind of meaning. I mean, you hear about Gen Z all the time using ChatGPT to basically answer all of their questions about their life, right? In a way that you might have prayed or turn to the good book, right, for your answer. Whatever your good book was, you might turn there. And so we're seeing this divergence between people moving away from sort of big box religion and finding new ways of expressing themselves spiritually. And that is through more traditional forms, indigenous forms, and more earthbound forms of spirituality and practice. And that's also lovely to see as well. And I think as we start to see, particularly the global south, having a much louder voice about their own experiences, their own understanding, and their own traditions, we'll start to see that a little bit more as well.
Yeah, and I love this. I mean, I love the avatars. I don't know if that was always like a feature of these reports, but brilliant.
I know that's the first time.
And this divergence. And I think I've seen this for a long time coming where you have it's not always generational, but increasingly there's people that are very intentionally analog and offline and more in tune to nature and off grid and all these things. That's kind of like where the social hacktivism comes in pieces as well. And then the people that are just like all into what we, traditionally or mostly think of technology as being, super hygienic, like not in tune to nature. Like it's like pointing this dichotomy of there's like nature versus technology versus, and the people that are offline are like, no, nature is technology, technology is nature, and versus the hyper, yeah, hyper minimalist even. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Um, there are always going to be these tensions and these dichotomies, right? And I think the the big problem, you just named it, right? The big problem is the technology versus nature, but they need to become one and the same. They need to feed into each other and they need to support each other in a way that they are absolutely not doing now. The biggest challenge that we're seeing is there is one side of this argument of those two people that you just mentioned who are significantly more powerful and significantly more wealthy, right? And those are the tech for tech's sake type people. Um, they are not building technology that is symbiotic with nature. They are not thinking about the environmental impact of the things that they're building, and that's the challenge that we have to try and overcome. Is those the people right now who are big tech, and we need to start thinking about the alternative, because otherwise there is no. I mean, they can try and build and build and build, but if there's no one there to sell to, what's the point? You know.
Yeah. And so what are your thoughts specifically on bringing more designing more technology by women and how that feed solves this problem or not?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm a women's health futurist, right? I think we need to own not just our story, but I think we need to own the story of the planet as well. Um, we've seen how men run things, and I think it's time that we understand how women could do something differently. And
Yeah.
that comes from everything. That comes through technology. That comes through culture. That comes through politics. It's science. It's medicine. It's everything, right? We are still a minority representation in absolutely every single major industrial industry. And we're not the ones that are controlling the finances. We are not the ones that are controlling the decision making in any of those major areas, right? So we need more female representation across the board, right? And minority representation across the board. If we're not hearing voices from the global south, we're not hearing enough voices, right? If we're not hearing more women and we're not giving the women the power, we're not giving people from the global south, we're not giving marginalized communities, people from lower socioeconomic groups, then we're not hearing enough voices. And those are the people that we need to really understand how things are impacting them, because they're the people who are most impacted by all of these things, right? They're the people who are most impacted by climate crisis. They're the people who are most impacted by the change in, how big tech decides to manufacture their products. These are the people who are most impacted by all of that. So we need to be hearing from them, give them the power to make the decisions as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the areas that I'm most passionate about is preventative health and, essentially giving everyone back their agency. Like, let's rethink. Medicine 2.0 has its place. It's really great at solving emergency type issues, but it doesn't really look at the root cause of anything. And I love there were several threads in the 2035 trend report that's really pointing to, I don't know if democratization is the right word, but just, having more tools essentially in your pocket on your phone. And I was at a conference recently where it was, it was like the Google Gemini of the world, if you will, video of like what your phone via, examining your retina, for example, can give you. And it's like, it's just this fine line. I mean, you must feel it too, where it's like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. And like, think how much more information like every individual could have and know more about themselves and all the potential amazing, the utopian version. And then you're like, well, I guess my iPhone's already scanning my retina every day with my face. Like, it's like, that's kind of where I go in terms of not getting drawn down with the potential dystopian. Okay, now we're scanning our retinas on a daily basis, and what might that mean?
Mm-hmm.
But what are you most excited about in terms of advanced diagnostics and more people having access and agency?
Yeah. So it's a really, really exciting thing, because I'm pro preventative health as well, right? I'm pro prediction, pro preventative health. It's completely okay. Our model has served its purpose, as you said, right? But now we can have really deep understandings of how our health and well-being will change and develop over time. And I think that's really important. I think it's important to the way that we have been developing these technologies to date, and we've been sharing information about our health, has been about really just data gathering, and we're kind of dumping a lot of data and information on the consumer without really giving them meaningful insights on actions that they can do. And I don't mean you didn't get enough sleep last night, try a bit of yoga before bed. I don't mean that. I mean real meaningful insights, because right now it's kind of anxiety tech, right? We're just filling people with information, but it's not really in a meaningful way, and it's not offering really preventative insights, like really meaningful preventative insights. And that's something that AI will be able to do. Now, there are pros and cons of this, right? The pros are fantastic. We can have more understanding of whether we're going to be at risk of specific autoimmune diseases or cognitive decline, how we will, how the menopause will impact us. We can do lots of things throughout our life in really simple lifestyle changes to improve our long-term health and well-being. And those are the really positive outcomes, right? Understanding, or, being able to highlight really dangerous, life-threatening diseases that might come down the line, and understanding if you're predisposed to them, or very, very early signals to them, right? So two really great ways of using it: preventing potentially life-threatening challenges, or just improving your health and well-being through really simple lifestyle health changes. Just using AI and predictive technologies, fantastic. The problem is all of these AI and predictive technologies are really still being trained on white Western men. And so we end up in a system where we've already been in a medical system that has been built around white Western men, right? And women or anyone of color is just immediately an other, right? And we are outside the realm of the norm within the medical industry. And so we don't really understand how anything really differently metabolizes in our bodies, right? And so we have to make sure that the way that we train this data and the way that we build these AI algorithms is done in an inclusive way, because otherwise we're just going to end up making that gender health and data gap even wider, and making that BIPOC health and data gap even wider, right? So we have to be very, very careful with all of these tools that we're building, and all of this knowledge that we're building, and these algorithms that we're creating are built on really, really diverse data sets. Otherwise, we're just going to end up in a situation that's actually probably potentially worse, right, in terms of outcomes than we have today. So we have to be very, very careful, and that's something that I will always bang my drum about is diversifying data sets. We don't have them still, but we have to gather
Yeah,
them.
I feel like it's, for the last 50 years, we've been in like the medical doctor is God. Like we've given them this one way too much authority when, if you know personally any doctors, I personally married to one, they have their specialty and they can be a genius at a certain thing, but they're not trained on a holistic viewpoint and they're not trained really for prevention. And um, like you say, like the new God in a lot of ways is going to be AI. And if we don't intentionally bring in multiple viewpoints and averages, like, one tiny example is I have this app that's connected to our scale, and I love it because I personally like to know like my age, like the based on, bone density and all these things. But the ideal weight that it gives based on the data that I've given it and is like I've never in my entire life, even at 18 years old, I was never even close to that. And I feel and just knowing like how so giving people more data is not the answer. It has to be informed and I think still as a coach, there's always going to be this place of the importance of human delivery and like human context and support given to, okay, this is what we see. And also here are, I love that it's talking about like hyper personalized nutrition because I think, I'm very much, there's no one size fits all and just how important it is that people understand these are averages. And then increasingly I think at least women are understanding, and these averages are based on not us. So
Mm-hmm.
grain of salt.
Yeah. And after we've just been, through decades of like different kinds of health fads where everyone thinks that one diet or exercise or something is going to completely change the game. And of course it does for some people, and those will be the poster children of these new crazes, right? And it doesn't work for everyone. And for some people it could be really, really dangerous because they have a different metabolic profile, they have a different DNA, makeup, and it can be really dangerous for some people. So understanding the hyper personalization pieces is going to be really important, and it will be really meaningful. But again, we really have to understand the nuances of how it impacts with everyone. I mean, we still don't really understand how most drugs metabolize at different points in your menstrual cycle, right? So there is still a long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think if nothing else, if women first understand that, it says not safe during pregnancy because no one's ever studied it. Like, so they're just like default mode, don't take it.
Yeah, we still don't really understand the impact of alcohol on breast milk, right? It's because you can't read. I mean, how do you do a study on that? I don't know, but we don't understand these very, very basic things. We still don't really understand the composition of breast milk or how to properly nourish mothers during that time. So there is still so far to go.
Yeah. I'd love if you can touch a little bit on the aging piece. So there's, at one point talking about how we're not so far off from the generation that will not age, which seems crazy. And then, the products that are geared specifically towards women no longer feeling like the need to be for your 20s, for your 30s, or that's how I read it. Is there something you can share with us about aging?
So it's not going to be a last generation to age. It was the last generation to die, right? Because we'll be able to save so much about ourselves in in digital forms, right? And no, I think what's going to be really important is we'll understand much better how each of these different things that we do throughout our lives, how they will impact our later life. So as we begin aging, we're likely to spend 50% of our lives in menopause, right? We're living longer than men, and yet we spend longer in ill health. And yet the longevity industry is all about men, and it's all about lifespan rather than health span. So really starting to reframe that topic around health span, around a meaningful, happy, healthy, and fulfilled life long term is going to be really important. And it's important to do that through the women's lens as well, because we've been so focused around longevity from a male perspective, we really need to understand how it impacts women differently. We're more susceptible to cognitive decline, so Alzheimer's and dementia. We're much more inclined to things like osteoporosis. So, and all of these things are actually impacted by menopause. And so if we understand better how to nourish ourselves and how to maintain a certain level of nourishment or of health, whatever, based on how we understand that we will specifically go through the menopause, we can help prevent some of those really, really challenging issues and diseases that you get in later life, and make sure that we're not just living longer, but we're living healthier in our old age and making really meaningful and fulfilled long lives, rather than this perspective of just trying to get an extra year in, which, if you're not happy, if you're not comfortable, if you're not thriving, what's the point?
Yeah, I love that you call out that statistic where, half of our lives as women are going to be post-menopause. Like that is massive. And then also, I think is it 1 billion women that are going to be in menopause by about in the next 5 years?
2030.
And I mean, so I'm excited for that report. Where can you give us any teasers? I mean, I think for me, one of the most important things that women understand is, I think we've misunderstood menopause so deeply for so many years, or just not understood anything about it, but how much you can affect things if you know what's coming, and understanding that it's like a 10-year process. It's not like 1 year, and how important your lifestyle habits are at the beginning, and how really you can ease your experience quite naturally. Not that that's the experience of everyone, but for me, I'm passionate about being sober. So not having alcohol in the mix is one thing that you can really consider at that point in your life, or, renegotiating your relationship with.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it's about understanding that the level of impact that something like alcohol will have on you, because you have people, my auntie say, who lived well into her 90s, was very, very happy, and was probably going through half a bottle a day of whiskey, right? And there are those people who always say, what's your key to long life? And it's like, oh, a glass of whiskey in the morning or whatever, right? And there's always, and a pack of cigarettes a day or whatever, right? There's always that person. And so there are some people who are much more impacted by things like smoking, environmental factors, eating certain foods. You might have a very, very healthy diet, but it might just be the wrong diet for you, for your DNA profile, for your metabolic health, right? And we just don't know that yet. So understanding exactly how you metabolize, exactly what your DNA profile is, and understanding what that impact is going to be about your lifestyle now, and how that will change and how that will impact your long-term health. I think those things are going to be really important. And going back to what you said about potentially too much information, and I do think it's not about stopping people living their lives or making people anxious or nervous and thinking, oh my God, if I have this glass of wine, I'm going to end up with dementia later. No, it's not about that. It's about giving you the tools to understand, okay, I can make these choices. I might be more susceptible to these potential risks as I get older. So then I can just make an informed decision about how much I push the boundaries, how much I transgress, or where I decide to indulge. It's not about saying that you can any all or nothings, right? It's about really just giving people the tools to understand what their potential risk factors are, because we don't know, and there are all these averages, and it's about personalizing that experience for everyone.
Love that. Beautiful. Last question. What are you reading, or can you give us a couple of book recommendations?
I've got 2 toddlers and I'm running a business, so I don't get to read a huge amount.
Not the moment.
A couple of
podcast.
I'm listening to Mother by Karina Bazarova, which is a fantastic Femtech podcast. That's brilliant. I recently read Want as well by Gillian Anderson, which is a brilliant book about collating women's experiences of sex. So that was really fun. Those are the two big things I think I can recommend right now.
Thank you, Anna, for sharing your expertise, your vision. And to learn more about Anna's work and the Femtech Futures reports, visit UltraViolet Agency. We'll drop the links in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with fellow founders and innovators. Any like last bits of wisdom or optimism for the future, Anna?
Yeah, everything that we do today has a huge impact on tomorrow. And there is still a lot of hope, and we can still really improve the way that we experience our health and well-being and the way that we engage with each other. So we can still put a lot of positivity into that.
Thank you. So grateful for this interview.
Thank you, Megan, for having me. This has been brilliant.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Wellness as a Way of Life for Women Building the Future. I'm Megan Swan, and I'm honored to support your journey to well-being and leadership. For more insights, resources, and connections, subscribe to my Substack through the link in this episode. It is your go-to hub for wellness strategies, and there's free and premium content. Let's keep building a brighter, healthier future together. Until next time, take care and lead well.